This got really weird with there was a new setting in YouTube that had never been an issue before, and suddenly it was an issue, and it was really frustrating. It said I had to rotate my screen in settings or something in advanced settings, and I was really puzzled by it. So that was really weird. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Let me know if you can. I can see we have Wendy Hickson, Frank the Tank, A, Mike Fernandez, 503 Menagerie, Laura Taylor, Kate Degonia, Tobias, Random T, Datura. The Pets is here. Still trying to figure out who all is here. Sandy Skinks is here as well. Good, yeah. Round one, Magnificent Animals. Great. All right. So you can see we're taking a look at my communal desert vivarium. I haven't really caught up with the chat because I was just checking for names. So to see who I could welcome to the chat. I see Finn Turner, was it? Was here just a second ago. Finn Turner, yeah. Welcome. First time tuning in. Well, excellent. Glad to see you here. Well, here we go. I'm gonna put some food down here. Food dish there. I've got fresh cricket and pre-killed cricket, and also some soaked dog food there. Oh, there goes my armadillidium, Dasymatilla klugi. So, and is it Mikal? Is that how you say it? Welcome. Mr. and Mrs. Morelia, hello. Theropod hunters here too. So I think I missed some things in the chat, and it's going to be ridiculous if I try to catch up. So if there's something you asked me or something you want to fill me in on, please just chime in. I'd love to hear it. So, yeah. What is that on the right side? Oh, over here. I've got 3 different things set up over here. Sorry. Have to maneuver a little bit. Okay. So you can see one, maybe you can see that. I don't know if you can see that. It says water on the left side and then nectar on the other side. And then the small one is also nectar, which is about 6 parts water to 1 part sugar, tiny bit of salt. So that's what that is. The beetles drink some of this. The velvet ants is what it's specifically for. The velvet ants depend on that and some beetle jelly for their nutrition, basically. There's one of the velvet ants now, the armadillidium. Why do I keep saying armadillidium? Dasymatilla klugi. Sorry. So, yeah, they're made specifically for ants, but they also work for velvet ants, which are not ants, they're wasps, but there you go. Works for them very well. So I see Datura, quite late where you live, but quite fond of the tranquil, informative, and articulated wholesomeness of Russ. I love that. So it's always worth staying a while. Well, I appreciate that. So Harvey, you were watching the video and got the notification for it. Well, that did you a lot of good, didn't it? And thank you, JH. I really like this tank, this setup here. I love it's a combination of not cork, why do I say that? Choya wood and weathered sagebrush, like aged weathered sagebrush is what it is there that I use for the wood. Substrate comes from US Invertebrate, LLC. They create this specifically for breeding blue death feigning beetles, this particular substrate. I don't know what that beetle's doing. It's really busy digging. When I was here before, just a minute ago, there were a ton of beetles in that spot, and for some reason they're not going out of the food. They're not going after the food where they usually do. So let's see what I can catch up. So I guess I answered JH question. Let's see. Tobias, would those be viable for most things like beetles and similar inverts? It just depends on the species. Some species will drink from them, some will not. So you just kind of have to experiment a little bit. I wasn't sure these would work for velvet ants originally, but then I've seen them drinking out of them many times, and so I've used them for a while now, several years in fact. Kasval Dekun, hello. Random T, 36 long by 12.5 wide by 17 high aquarium. I'm racking my brain for what I want to put it in. Are you looking for something aquatic or something terrestrial? What are you thinking about? There are a lot of options for something that big. So Kazumi says, these are awesome. I use them in my terrarium because I keep micro ants in with my isopods. I have a biodiverse terrarium. My other terrarium without ants enjoys them also. Cool. So Kasumi, do your isopods use them? Are you saying your isopods use the waters? That's interesting. Cassandra Roberts, can I ask why you can't ship dairy cow isopods to Oregon? Yes, that is a great question. I changed my website because of the information that came out about dairy cow isopods, that they are no longer considered Porcellio laevis. That being the case, they're technically not covered by my permit to ship Porcellio laevis. And I don't know that APHIS is enforcing it, but I just figured I'd stay on the safe side. They will probably enforce it at some point, and I'm going to stay on the safe side. And rather than try to ship those isopods that are not laevis to out of state, I'm just going to stop shipping them out of state for that reason. The good news is you can probably find them locally pretty easily. Interesting, Kasumi. The isopods use the waters. Very cool. Hey, Gemma, it's been a while. Great to see you back. Ramingo, your first university day in a few hours. Awesome. Archaeology. That is fantastic. Well, enjoy your first day, and I hope that your first day and your first semester and everything else turn out great. How was my week? My week has not been great. This is a good point in my week, and I've had some good points in my week. I feel like I always have some good points in a day, which is good. But this is my problem, and my problem is that I got sick last week. Those of you who were here in the live stream may remember that I was saying, oh, I've got a headache, and I did the live stream anyway, enjoyed doing that, but I had a headache and it was getting worse as the live stream was getting close to the end. And it turns out I was getting a headache not just because I was getting a headache, but because I was getting sick. So I have been sick most of this past week, and I am feeling, well, I'm not, I guess I can't honestly say I feel a lot better. I am recovering and feel better than I have during some parts of this past week right now. But I don't feel awesome. So it hasn't been my best week. Uh, okay. So there's a couple of different terms you can use. I see that Kate Degonia and Tobias is asking, they're asking some questions about P. laevis. So, or not P. laevis, formerly P. laevis. And I want to make sure I give you the right answer. It's a great question. Tobias, I can say, are you secure in owning them? Well, I would say that it would not be. Oh, Aunt Sandy Skinks is asking about that too. So let me get you the answer here. Nate has the nomenclature we need, so I want to make sure I give the proper name to it. I'm just scrolling through to make sure I get the right answer, because I should remember this, but I'm having a hard time remembering it exactly right now. Um, there's a specific term you can use. Where is it? Darn, I'm having some trouble finding it. You can call them, shoot, I don't know, I'm having such a hard time. I just want to make sure I say it right. You can call them X Porcelia laevis, but there's another term you can use, and I just can't remember it right now. So it's in the comments for that video. I just can't remember it. So I apologize. I was scrolling through seeing if I could find it, and I absolutely could not find it. Let me see if I can find it here one more time as we're talking about other things. I can do a search. No, I can't do a search in comments on my phone. That's painful. I can't. Okay, I apologize. So anyway, it's in there. So Tobias was asking if we can actually keep them, and I was saying no. You don't have to worry about not keeping them. You can keep them. You can't ship them across state lines. APHIS, as far as APHIS is concerned, anyway, I'm only referring to the rules that Lavis or that APHIS provides, and they regulate the interstate travel of uh, insects and crustaceans and various other things, uh, plant pests in general, as well as some other things. So since isopods are in that umbrella, they're crustaceans, they're arthropods, they cannot travel across state lines without a permit. And if you keep them, they're not going to do anything. So there you go. And I think Kate asked, did I have? No, I didn't have COVID. I tested for it because it felt like it, but apparently not. Apparently that's not what it was. So Rice Smith, yeah, we're looking at some darkling beetles. There are other beetles in here that are not tenebrionids as well, but the ones that are showing in the screen right now are various types of darkling beetles. There's another one that just came in. I think maybe a different family. I'm not sure. I'll have to look up the taxonomy of there, but there are several darkling beetles from the Tenebrionidae in here. Okay, so JH, what kind of pet food am I giving the beetles? This is just dog food, cheap dog food soaked in water, and there's also a cricket, a pre-killed cricket in there. Both pretty staples. They're good staples in there that I give them. The pre-killed crickets are especially good for them. So there is a pre-killed cricket as well as some dog food, and they're both pretty good foods for them. So theropod hunter, if dairy cows and milkbacks are both not P. laevis, are then they the same species as each other? They are the same species as each other. It has been demonstrated by Nathan, who I cited in my last video. He indicated that they are indeed the same species. He was able to cross them and got what looked like wild types in the F1 generation, and then the F2s, they look like dairy cows. So yeah, they can interbreed just fine. I never really had any doubts that they could interbreed. The problems I had was trying to cross either one of them with oranges. That was not working. What we know as P. Porcelio CF laevis orange would not cross with them successfully, but they can cross with each other. And let's see, I see Datura, you're asking, you can repeat the question if it doesn't get answered, repeat it. Some people might try to spam it like every 10 seconds. Of course, don't do that. But every minute or so, if I haven't gotten to it, feel free to repeat it. It's not going to bother me. Let's see. Texas ironclads available on the U.S. side of the hobby yet? Oh, yes, they are. And I've seen some of them, and they're amazing. I have an ironclad, but I don't have any. I don't have any of the Texas ironclads. Okay, can you quickly tell the viewers what my substrate consists of? Okay, so Frank the Tank. Let's see. Substrate. This is a substrate produced by U.S. Invertebrate LLC, and it's a two-layer substrate. The bottom is composed of organics, and you can't really see it very well, but the bottom is composed of organic material. It has some rotted wood, I think, in it, and some things like that, some leaf litter. And of course, as it settles over time and creatures dig, because I have beetle larvae in here and stuff, you can see some of those leaves have come up to the top. When I originally put it here, it was almost pure, um, like an orange sand, which is up at the top, and the organic layer was down below. And there's some of that still going on, but you can't quite see it as well as you used to be able to. Anyway, the substrate is produced by US Invertebrate LLC with the intention of maximizing or optimizing your chances of breeding things like blue death fanning beetles and other desert beetles. And I do have larvae in here. I've seen them, and I should pull some. And if I can, if I ever can get to it, I have too many irons in the fire, honestly. But if I can ever get to it, I'm going to pull some larvae out of there and try to incubate them in my garage in an incubator I have out there. So So Ramingo asked, is my full name Russell? It is, with two L's at the end. Russell. Nobody calls me that except, well, I have one friend who occasionally calls me that. He's known me for decades and will occasionally call me that just to be funny. And my mom used to call me that when she was frustrated with me. And so um, it's not my favorite thing to hear. Um, uh, just because I associate it with frustration, I guess. So I like to use Russ. And Mom, if you're listening, don't feel bad about that. It's not your fault. I did plenty of frustrating things when I was a kid. Oh, Ramingo, have you ever thought about getting some of those Japanese beast beetles? You know, though that would be cool. I haven't considered it, at least until I get a facility where I can have a containment facility, because in the US, most of those beetles, I think there may be a couple that are okay, but most of them are not uh, legal to own in the US. At least it's not legal to have them cross state lines. And so I haven't pursued that. But if I get a containment facility, which is my hope, I hope to get a containment facility at some point, then I can get permits for them and I'll be fine. And then I would love to play with that. I love the Velvenets too, 503. I've got four in here, and I've seen two of them today. That Klugii that I have here that keeps zipping past, that's the one everybody's seeing. It's a larger one. It's not quite as big as like an Occidentalis, but this one right here, it's a pretty big one. It's probably about an inch long, maybe a little longer than that. And it is super active, like all day. If the light's on, that Belvedere is out and about. I have two Dasimutilla vistita, which are considerably smaller and not nearly as bold. They tend to be a bit shy. And then I have a little Timula in here, which I haven't seen for a little while, so hopefully it's still doing okay. But yeah, they're super super. The Klugi is super super active. Love it. Casval, yeah, it can be difficult keeping the um, comments low, comments under 200 letters. I understand that for sure. So, Tobias, does my mom like bugs? Let's say she has a great, uh, blessed tolerance for me liking bugs. Of course, when I was growing up, I had all sorts of creatures, including a lot of arthropods, and she was very tolerant of that because she wanted me to let develop my passions and interests and hobbies and skills and whatnot. So um, she was very tolerant about that. She's not a real fan of bugs. I mean, she likes butterflies and stuff, but um, not a huge fan of bugs, but is very tolerant and helped support me that way, as did my dad. I think he's in about the same boat as my mom. They're not really big bug fans, but they were both very supportive. So Kevin was asking a question about Darkling beetles, yeah. Darkling beetles is a huge group, and I hear people say, mealworm beetles are darkling beetles. That's true, but it's not very precise. The same thing about superworm beetles could be said, and the same thing could be said about many, many different beetles, because there are thousands of tenebrionid beetles that uh, are very correctly, but not precisely, referred to as darkling beetles. It's like you can say um, monitor lizard. Now, there are many species of monitor lizards, and you can say, hey, that's a monitor lizard, that's a monitor lizard, that's a monitor lizard, point at 3 different species. You could be right, but um, it's not very precise. And this could be an Aki monitor, and that might be a Nile monitor, and that might be a Komodo dragon. So while it's correct to refer to superworm and mealworm beetles as darkling beetles, it's also correct to refer to many, many, hundreds and hundreds, in fact, thousands of other beetles as darkling beetles, and be equally correct. If that makes sense. Okay. Cosfall, I see your question. I'm trying to catch up with all the questions. Do garters eat their babies if you leave them in with them permanently? I'm planning a large enclosure build, and a lot of the structures in there won't be able to be moved. So, Cosfall, I would say they're not going to eat them, most likely. There are a few that might be a little bit more prone to cannibalism. I've heard that the wandering garter can be prone to cannibalism a little bit, but I haven't heard them eating their babies specifically. But uh, I've never had a problem with cannibalism, and that's generally not going to be the issue if you keep them in with the adults. The issues might be more about the babies getting enough food, and getting food of the appropriate size, and I guess in a way cannibalism, because if babies try to eat food while an adult's trying to eat it, you know who's going to win, and the adult's going to keep swallowing. So there's that potential issue too. So yeah, sorry, I'm bouncing back and forth. I'm never going to catch all your questions, so don't feel bad about repeating your questions. I'm never going to catch them all. There's too many questions in the chat. Once in a while, I'll go back. Generally, I just kind of go forward, and I'm happy for you to repeat your questions. So Datura has a millipede questions. Orthomorpha. Huh. I don't think I've ever heard of the Orthomorpha species of millipede, so I'm afraid I have an issue there, that I can't help you, just because I'm not sure what, uh, I don't know much about that species. So I'm going to take this for take it off of the tripod here, so we can take a better look, because I feel like we're losing some things. So there we go. I wanted to look over here and see. I hope that hide beetle didn't pass away. These hide beetles are so cool. Got this one from my Sky Island adventure. It came to the lamp, if I remember correctly, and it was really cool. And they do well in desert setups, and it's been doing well, but it's staying awfully still. So hopefully it's okay. I mean, some of these, there's a lot of beetles in here. Some of them are going to pass away. That's inevitable, but I hope that's not what happened. Check out this beetle here. I love the mucro, which is the extension of the abdomen here that you see. It's quite a long, thin extension of the abdomen. And mucro can refer to other long extensions on the body, not just on the tip of the abdomen, but the ones on the tip of the abdomen certainly qualify as mucros. But if it had like a spike on its body or something, that could also qualify. It's basically a pointy thing that sticks off of an insect, at least a beetle. I'm not sure how many other insects it applies to be honest, but it does apply to beetles. I love it. I think it's so cool. What was that? Squeaking noise. Oh, I probably just bumped into something with my shoe. So Mosseri, can I raise dark king beetles from superworms, get them to breed, then have a good farm for my critters? Oh yes, I do it all the time. I have a constant supply of superworms that I give to not only my leopard gecko, but also chickens, and some of my other animals, like my giant My giant water bug eats them, and so on. My scorpions eat them. So yeah, that's what I do. I basically, if you have enough substrate and the substrate will support tunnels, you can just keep a bunch of superworms in there. If it's warm enough and there's enough humidity, and you're feeding the beetle, they're feeding the larvae, they will find their own little places to tunnel and build a little pupal chamber. And then you don't have to worry about separating them. And they will pupate like that. And then they'll mate and produce a whole bunch of babies. That's how I do it. I haven't separated a superworm into a separate container for breeding for a long time because that's just how I do it. And it works perfectly as long as those you know respect those guidelines that I just mentioned. That works just fine. So random tea. Oh, shell dwellers. I love shell dwellers. I had a colony of uh, Neolamprologus multifasciatus for years and loved it. I only got rid of it because I needed to. It was basically to give my corn snake a much larger enclosure. I had the multis in a 29, and I needed the space to set up a larger enclosure for my uh, corn snake that was much larger than 29 gallons, and I had to make that choice. And so I ended up selling off the entire colony and the tank and everything to someone, uh, and he gave me an update once or twice, and they were doing really well. So I miss them, but you have to make hard choices sometimes like that. I think this is a rough death fanning beetle right here. So Ramingo has a question. Is the passing away of a bug worse than one of a bigger pet like a snake? I only know how it felt with my old dog, but how is it for you? It depends. It depends on the bond that I have, whether that bond is mostly in my mind. In some cases, like with a lot of arthropods, I think the bond that I have is more important than the bond that they have with me, because generally with arthropods, they don't really have one. That can depend, though. I mean, with a jumping spider, for example, I do think they have a bond with you. They can have a bond with you. So it depends. It's never great when I find one of my pet bugs has passed away, but with a large tank of beetles like this, if I see one and and I see that it has passed away, it's sad, but it's not as devastating as it would be if you know the day that, and hopefully it's many many years in the future, but when our snake, our corn snake passes away, that's going to be kind of a devastating time. And I won't. Not gonna lie, when our budgie passed away, and it's been a little while now, it's been well over a year, and when our budgie passed away, I cried like a baby. I totally cried like a baby. So it just depends. I think it can be more difficult with vertebrates that very much demonstrate a bond with you, like a budgie can. There was no question we were very good friends with our budgie. He was a member of the family, basically, and so everybody just cried like a baby when he died. Um, I couldn't even talk about it for a long time. So yeah, that was rough. And so it's not going to be comparable if I say, "Oh, that's too bad. I lost a beetle in here." It's sad. It's regrettable, and I might wonder, "Oh, is this something that I could have done better?" And I might think about that, but at the same time, it's not going to be as devastating as it would be if I lost, uh, you know, like I said, a vertebrate that very obviously has a bond with us, something like that. So, Imaginary Eye is asking, will a snake eat these beetles? Most snakes would not. There are some snakes that might, but most snakes are not particularly interested in eating beetles. And I will say there are exceptions to that. There are some snakes that are very much specialists in eating arthropods. So, with some of those snakes, they might eat some of these beetles. But I will say that most of these beetles are probably not very interesting to snakes, even the snakes that do specialize in arthropods, because many of them have repugnant oral fluids that would probably make them uncomfortable, make the snakes, it's a distasteful experience for the snakes. And some of them are probably just too hard and armored like a blue death veining beetle, I don't imagine that would make a very good meal for a snake. But there aren't that many snakes that. Sorry about that. Having some issues there. I think we're back. Are we back? Yeah. There aren't that many snakes that would be interested in eating them. But of the ones that do eat arthropods, I don't think these beetles would be the best meal for it. Let's just summarize it that way. Okay. So, and Tobias, that's a good point. If you have large numbers of something, the more likely you're going to have a dead one, just statistically, right? Yeah, it's true. If you have thousands of isopods, it would be unlikely for me to be able to go through my thousands of isopods today and not find any dead ones. It's pretty likely I'm going to find some dead ones. And that's not necessarily a problem. It can be if I look at the enclosure and I say, oh, there's more dead ones than I would expect to see in this enclosure. I might not find it unusual to find one or two if I have 4, 5, 600 isopods in an enclosure. But if I find 15 or something, I can say, oh, there's probably an issue I need to address. So that's important. Oh yes. So and Sandy remembers when Twilly, Twilly was with a instead of D's there were L's, so TWILLY, and we were so sad. Oh, Wendy, sorry to hear about your jumping spider. That's one of the hardest arthropods in my experience to have them pass because they're so personable. Okay, so Ramingo says let's put aside reptiles and arthropods. Could we even do that? Are you team dog or team cat? I would much rather have a cat. I like dogs, but dogs are so much of a commitment that I would rather deal with a cat because they're much lower maintenance, at least in my current life situation. I do not want to get a dog because they take so much commitment and, they require so much of you personally and so on that I don't think I'm in a place in my life where that would be a good idea. Cats, we do have 2 cats right now, and they're not nearly as demanding as a dog would be. But I think if I had unlimited time and some of the other considerations about how a dog, mm, what you need to do for a dog, if it were just like I had all the time in the world and I didn't need to worry about my time, I might prefer a dog. But in a practical sense, I don't because of that, if that makes sense. So Theropod Hunter has a question about smooth green snakes, but I don't know where that question is. I lost it. Feel free to ask it again. So Mikael, what other pets can I house with blue death eating beetles? Besides other beetles and velvet ants, some people house desert hairy scorpions and possibly other scorpions with blue death veining beetles pretty successfully. Oh, Frank the Tank just answered that. And Datura, I think some springtails can, change color to some degree. I haven't deeply looked into that, but it makes sense. Even some isopods, you can change their color by what you feed them, especially the really pale isopods like whiteouts. If you feed them things with a lot of carotenoids or other natural colorants in them, they can change color. And Julie, I'm not hating on dogs or dog people. Definitely not. I think dogs are amazing. It's just that's where I am in my life right now, where I don't think I have the time to dedicate to a dog, so I don't want to get one because of that. If that makes sense. So Casval, there are there's some pretty compelling evidence that garter snakes can sometimes give birth parthenogenically. I don't think it's a common thing, but there have been some cases that appear to be the result of parthenogenesis in garter snakes. So JT Spears, how big is your biggest enclosure? Like how many isopods are in there? Let's see. I honestly don't know. I have lots of isopods enclosures where there are hundreds of isopods, hundreds, and I don't even know how many. So there may be some with thousands, perhaps. The biggest containers I have with isopods in them, at least on purpose, that are not bioactive setups, are probably I think it's the 28 quart enclosures. If these feisty rascals could talk, what would they be saying right now? I think they'd be saying something like, "Hey, hey, hey, get out of my way! This is my lunch." Something like that. Yeah, dairy cows are one because they have such pale bodies that if they are eating a lot of things with carotenoids in them, you'll definitely see some orange tinges to their legs and other parts of their bodies sometimes. Oh, I see Therapod. Yeah. Yeah, smooth green snakes are an example of largely arthropod eating snakes. There's one called the variable ground snake. Around here, we have the yellow bellied racer. They eat a lot of arthropods, especially grasshoppers and things like that. Oh, sorry you have a headache, Datura, but thank you for coming in. So, Tobias, yeah, I'd have to prepare for that very specifically, space wise and camera angle wise and so on, but we could probably do something like that. Um, we could probably do something like that where we show the larger isopod setups at some time. Okay, well, thank you, Julie. I try, and I find that it's something I have to reevaluate often and decide, okay, where am I now? What do I need to do? And right now, I'm honestly in a place where I think I need to downsize some of my isopods a little bit. So I'm working on doing that. I have worked on doing that a bit, just because part of it has to do with practicality of I can't ship a lot of the species I have, so it doesn't make sense financially for me to have species I can't ship as much. I need to maybe focus more on the isopods that I can ship, and maybe not completely. I do have permits to keep quite a few that that I can keep and whatnot that I really like Gestroy, but I can't ship Gestroy, which is sad, but it's true. And Frank the Tank, I have thought about doing that with a really deep substrate and seeing if I could get the larvae to pupate in situ, I guess. That would be really cool. I haven't done it. I don't have a good place to do that right now, but I think that would be really cool if I could do that. Aqua Garden Zen, good to see you here. So, Mikhail, if you have your blue death veining beetles mating, that's awesome. What you should probably do is keep an area of the enclosure more moist, like a corner of the enclosure moist, and possibly keep some well-rotted wood as part of the substrate, or just some chunks of well-rotted soft wood in that area and keep it moist. You'll probably get some egg deposition there. As far as timing, it shouldn't take very long. Especially your beetles may well have been fertile before that, before you have witnessed that mating. So you may have eggs any day now. They will lay eggs in other places in the substrate, and as long as they have some dampness to the lower levels of the substrate, they can survive as long as they're not eaten. The adults will sometimes eat the eggs, but uh, you have a pretty good chance that you might even actually have larvae in there, and as long as you have some damp lower levels of the substrate, that they're growing and doing okay. Oh, Ramingo, I'm glad that this live stream feels like a safe space for you. That's awesome. So, Aqua Garden Zen. You got some Jestroy from me? Wow. It must have been a while ago because I haven't shipped them in a really long time. But I'm glad they're doing well for you. So, what can be cohabited in a high humidity environment with ice pods, millipedes, springtails, and snails? Well, if you're into roaches, there's some roaches that can do that for sure. And Kevin, yeah, there you go. When you hit that limit, and you know that there are animals that you can't really increase your collection without downsizing or making some changes or just not increasing your collection. It's a good thing to know. I love Western hognoses too. That's a snake that's on my list of snakes I want to keep someday. But yeah, that's the responsible way to do it. So 503, you've got some pupation chambers in your desert beetle tank, but don't know which species. Well, that's awesome. And you probably won't until they close, but that's cool. That's kind of a fun surprise. So Casval, I have an African violet in a closed jar terrarium. Wow. Do you have any plants that are not generally considered terrarium plants that you've had a lot of success with? Hmm, good question. Trying to think. I have a decent number of plants. Some are aquatic, some are being grown aquaponically, some are, I have some like tillandsias that are not planted in any substrate at all, and I've got plenty of vivarium plants. I don't know. I can't really think of any that aren't. I tend to stay with fairly commonly kept vivarium plants. So Tobias, is it too late in the season to ship to Michigan? I want to purchase something from Russ before the end of the year, maybe. It's absolutely not too late. I actually find shipping in winter is easier than shipping in summer because it's easier to put a heat pack in with something than it is to put a cold pack. Well, I put cold packs in things too, but it's just I find it's easier to combat the heat or combat the cold with a warm pack, with a heat pack, than it is to combat the cold with the heat with a cold pack. That makes sense. And so, absolutely, can still ship to you, no problem. Oh, Theropod Hunter, congratulations on your bark pattern fruit beetles. I bet those are cool. So, Frank the Tank, ever thought of adding some beneficial bacteria cultures to the substrate layers? Ooh, I've done that with some of my vivariums. Oh, look, here's one of my little teeny beetles. I love the fact that there's such variation in size. I have a really huge Eleodes obscura in here and some really nice long beetles. This one's probably just as long, maybe longer than my Eleodes obscura. It's just not as wide-bodied. And then you get the little wee ones. It's fun to see the variety. Um, okay, I have kept bacteria. I have added bacteria and mycorrhizae to uh, some enclosures with the intent of, making them work better, I guess. Does that make sense? And helping benefit the ecosystem. So I have done that. What are some easy hybrids to make? I don't know if there are any easy hybrids to make, Ramingo, except possible exception of Porcelionides florea and Porcelionides pruinosus, but there wouldn't be a good benefit to that. So when you're saying hybrids, do you mean interspecific hybrids where you're crossing two different species, or are you talking about crossing different morphs and producing other morphs? Because there's a big difference there, and I just want to make sure I understand where you're going. Because I don't think um, there's not very much hybridization going on in the icepod hobby, and that's probably a good thing that there isn't. Let's see. But if you're looking at producing morphs, then I can totally give you some ideas. There's that one with the really long mucro. Love that when it shows up. It can hide a lot. Okay. Okay, so you're talking about visual morphs. Okay, Tobias. Yeah, yeah, we can talk about that for sure. Um, I would say some of the easiest ones to work with and create different varieties or recreate different varieties or whatever Porcellio morphs. That the first time I ever produced a separate color morph from one I had already purchased was when I crossed the Spanish orange Porcellio with the Dalmatian Porcellio, and then the first generation, of course, looks like wild types, but you cross those wild types to each other, and then some of the babies are going to look like Dalmatians, some are going to look like wild types, some are going to look like oranges, but some are going to be orange Dalmatians, and that's what I did. So that's a good one to work with. You can do a lot with Armadillidium vulgare as well, and another one would be Porcellionides pruinosus. If you get orange, powder orange, and you get Oreo crumbles, you can produce some orange pied individuals in the same way that I described producing the Porcellio orange Dalmatian. You can do a very similar thing. So Ramingo, what animal of yours is the most challenging to keep? Let's see. I really shoot for low maintenance creatures, to be honest. That's like my thing, because I want to keep a wide variety. And so I tend to keep pretty low maintenance creatures. I would say the fish take a fair amount of effort. The cats take a fair amount of effort. The chickens take a fair amount of effort. I'm just trying to think of the things that need daily care. I guess my Daphnia cultures actually take pretty much daily effort to produce really well. I mean, I can ignore them for a few days and it's not going to hurt the colony as a whole, but it will slow down their production. So, yeah, when we go on trips that are just like 2 days, I don't have to get people to take care of my reptiles except for maybe check the snake water dishes and make sure they don't dry out and they don't get pooped in. But we have to have people take care of our chickens and our cats for sure. So maybe those chickens and the cats are probably the two that are most challenging in terms of time of effort. In terms of like technical expertise, I guess they're not, but in terms of like the amount of time spent, they are. And Tobias, sure, please do. You can message me through the website. There's a contact page. You can email me there. You can also contact me through Facebook Messenger or Instagram DMs, and I'll answer any one of those. Sometimes it might take me a couple days, but I will answer any of those. I would say the best two are the contact page on the website and Instagram DMs. Facebook, because it's weird how it works, and I have sort of two different accounts and I have to switch between the accounts to answer messages. I sometimes miss those for longer. Okay, so Cusval, besides fruit flies, what is another really small feeder that isn't hard to breed or contain? Springtails are a good one, but another one I'll mention is rice flower beetles or confused flower beetles. They are super easy to work with, and their larvae are comparable in size to fruit flies. They're longer, but something that can eat fruit flies is probably not going to have a hard time with confused flower beetle larvae. Not much really eats the adults. A few things do, but um, generally the adults have a repugnatorial fluid like benzoquinones or something that tastes unpleasant. So not as many things eat the adults, but the babies, the larvae, they will eat those, and they're super easy to work with. Oh, theropod hunter, your water boatman tank has a huge boom of copepods. Fantastic. I do like copepods. I see those in my tank sometimes too. So Tobias, buffalo beetles. I have kept buffalo beetles. It's been a while. They're super easy. They're basically keep them about the same way you keep mealworms. They work well as cleanup crews for a lot of creatures. People use them as cleanup crews for cricket bins, for roaches, and whatnot. But it's basically they need some sort of substrate, and you can use just like mealworms. You can use oatmeal or lots of different things you could use, and then give them vegetables for hydration and variety of nutrients. They do really well. They grow fast too. Hmm. It's fun to see how everybody's so active in here. It's always active. There's this little guy. I think this might, I'm not sure if this is one I got from Sky Island Adventures or this is one I collected locally. Because I do collect, I can collect darkling beetles locally. I don't see my Eleotes obscurus out right now, but it's a big one and I collected it locally. It's bigger than like this big one here. This one I got from my Sky Island Adventures, the big one you see here. All of these come here from either Bugs in Cyberspace or Sky Island Adventures. And yeah, some of this bigger springtails could be great feeders. Oh, theropod hunter for cave crickets. A setup for cave crickets. What else could go with them? I'm wondering, you could probably do some millipede species with them. I'm not sure how that would go when the millipedes are molting. So Tobias, your colony is slowing down? Your colony of what? Oh, your buffalo beetles. Okay, you can't find any at local stores. Well, I would suggest maybe taking some of them out, taking 50 or 100 of them out, something like that, putting them in a completely new setup and see if that rejuvenates them. Sometimes that's what it is. So, Kevin Santiago, Ioni salticidae rus, meaning the jumping spiders. I do. I have a Phidippus ardens and a Phidippus regius, both females, and they're great. Uh, the ones I have are not like super tame. Sometimes the Phidippus regius, it's not bad. It's fairly tame. I mean the Phidippus ardens is fairly tame, but I don't take it out a lot, so it's not like super into handling. But the regius I haven't really handled much at all, and it's doing great, but it's not super tame. But I do like them a lot. They're fun. They're beautiful spiders. Look at the little phalanges on the pronotum on this one. I'm trying to remember the species name. I'm pretty sure it starts with an S. And these apparently don't live very long. They're just like a sort of a seasonal thing. The adults only last like the summer and into the fall and not much longer than that. A lot of these will last a long time. I mean, blue death fanning beetles, of course, can live well over a decade, but a lot of these Eleotes and other related beetles can last a long time too. I've had them have them last a decent long time, but apparently this species doesn't. I think it's pretty cool that there are so many springtails the springtails are becoming so popular. At the same time, I haven't really gotten into it partly because I think I'm worried that if I get into a particular species, it might overtake my other springtail colonies, and then I'm stuck because I can't ship a specific species that I'm keeping. That could be a problem. So Pleasant, would you think Madagascar hissing cockroaches would pair with springtails and isopods? Um, I did an interview with Kyle from Roach Crossing a while ago, and he explained that he keeps them together, and he does really well. Madagascar hissing cockroaches are great to keep with isopods because they can stay out of the way of isopods when they're molting. So that's not an issue because they can climb glass, and isopods can't climb clean glass. So he will keep things like rubber duckies with his Madagascar hissing cockroaches, and they will do really well because the isopods benefit from the bacteria-rich frass of the roaches, and they do exceptionally well. He said he says his rubber duckies, if I remember correctly, what he was mentioning is that he keeps rubber duckies with Madagascar hissing cockroaches. They do much better than they do when he tries to keep them on his own. So what he's done to work with a lot of these isopods is just make sure they're paired with a good roach colony, and they do really, really well. It's like perfect. So the isopods function as a cleanup crew, but they benefit greatly from being a cleanup crew for roaches like Madagascar hissing cockroaches. And I'm sure the same is true of springtails. And Casval, I've actually thought a lot about Urodactyloides. They're pretty cool. I talked to, there's a guy who lives near here. His name is Josh, who breeds them. I know a couple of people who have them, and they're really pretty cool little geckos. I haven't seriously thought about keeping them for a while. I don't have, space to set up for any more large things like the setup. I mean, Urodactyloides wouldn't need a lot of space because they're pretty small, but I don't really have any space to dedicate to them right now, but maybe someday. So Laura Taylor, yeah, this particular species, I have about 3 of them in here, and those will pass away, and I will probably just add some more tenebrionids when they pass away, I'm guessing. And the velvet ant is super awesome. I love this little lady. She's amazing. Brought her to a presentation the other day, and that was kind of cool to introduce people to velvet ants. People who had never seen velvet ants, some of them. Yeah, it's almost time to close up here. Close up shop. Any thoughts on what type of isopods to put with Mentella baroni frogs? Orange cream and powder, orange on hand, but worry they would be too big to keep with the frogs. I wouldn't worry about that as much, but I would worry about possibly. I have found that when I put powders with dart frogs, and Mentellas are not dart frogs, but they do live in similar environments, and they have a similar sort of ecological niche, that they don't seem to thrive as well as some others. I would say you could go with, and assuming you have a planted vivarium, which I think is a safe assumption, or if you're keeping Mentellas, uh, Porcelaria scabra are tried and true. People have used those in the dart frog hobby for years. Uh, the dart frogs can't eat the adults. Mantellas probably wouldn't eat the adults either, except for when you're talking about dart frogs, true dart frogs, Tinctorius will eat Porcelaria scabra, but most dart frogs won't. And I'm assuming Mantellas are similar, but I can't be certain of that. That they won't eat the adults, but they will eat some of the young ones, and they'll keep the numbers down because of that, but they won't be able to eat the adults, so they can't eliminate them. So I hope that helps. I can't give a lot of very specific information about Mantellas because I've never kept them. So Tobias, yeah, there you go. Keep giant canyons in your roach bin, and they exploded. Uh, that makes sense. And were these Madagascar hisser roaches, or they were another type of roaches? And that's true, Tobias. Dwarf whites do well with dart frogs, of course, as well, and probably with Mantellas. So Exotile, sorry you're feeling sick too. Ooh, Aqua Garden Zen. Reef tanks are amazing. I've done that a little bit, dabbled in that for a few years, enjoyed it, but it does a lot of work. And Young Lad's here too, cool. And Julie Moore, yeah, you could probably find out some good roach and isopod combos. Just be careful with, there are some species of isopods and roaches that don't do as well together. The ones that have utheke, that are laying eggs in egg cases, do not necessarily, and it depends on the species. Some of them do just fine with isopods, but apparently um, ones that don't climb and that produce utheke can have some complications with certain isopods, and less so with others. So just keep that in mind. Little spiky beetle on the left side of the enclosure. Which one are we talking about? Shoot, sorry. Pleasant. If there's one beginner isopod species you recommend for a drier tank, what it would be? Probably uh, Porcelionides prunosus if you want it for a bioactive tank with plants. If you're doing just more display species and you don't care whether or not it gets along well with plants, then you could do an armadillidium like Armadillidium maculatum the zebra, Armadillidium vulgare, they both do well in drier tanks. But powders, the Porcellinodes prunosus does really well in drier tanks and is excellent for bioactive. Just in all of those cases, they're going to need a moist area, but most of the tank can be dry and just have that moist area, and that could be enough. All right, well, we are about out of time. Thank you everyone so much for joining me today, and I hope you've enjoyed the stream. I've enjoyed sharing my communal beetle and velvet ant enclosure with you, and we will catch you next time.